Hello and welcome to The Point for World Affairs. I'm Tae-sang-mi. The international community has condemned the murder of U.S.-based Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi, who had been sharply critical of Saudi Arabia's monarchy. President Trump is also in hot water after he defended the royal family, which allegedly ordered the killing. Today, we take a look at how this incident will affect diplomatic relations between the United States and Saudi Arabia and the power dynamics in the Middle East. For that, we have with us Dr. Koo, a research fellow at the Seoul National University Asia Center. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
But first, let's get a brief look at the events leading up to his death.
On October 2nd, Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi went missing after paying a visit to the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, Turkey. Turkish authorities believe that the dissident journalist, who worked as a columnist for the Washington Post, criticizing the Saudi royal family's foreign policies, was killed inside the consulate. In the midst of the investigation, the world was shocked after Turkish media reported that he was indeed brutally murdered after being tortured as a result of a meticulously planned operation. According to Turkish media and the police, Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is allegedly behind the killing, as evidence suggests the Crown Prince's bodyguards were involved in the operation. The Saudi royal court, which initially denied the killing, finally admitted to Khashoggi's death 18 days after his disappearance, but stood by their stance that the incident was an accident over an argument gone wrong.
أظهرت التحقيقات الأولية التي أجرتها النيابة العامة في موضوع اختفاء المواطن جمال بن أحمد خاشقجي أن المناقشات التي تمت بينه وبين الأشخاص.
But Turkish authorities and foreign media outlets are doubtful. According to CNN, its exclusive law enforcement surveillance footage shows a man leaving the Saudi consulate by the back door, wearing Khashoggi's clothes, a fake beard, and glasses. The man in the video was allegedly part of what investigators have said a hit squad sent to kill the journalist. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan urged an independent commission to conduct an investigation, saying there is strong evidence that Khashoggi was intentionally killed. As suspicions and doubts continue to rise, the international community is raising its voices, calling for more answers. On The Point World Affairs, we take a look at how the Khashoggi case will affect diplomatic relations between Saudi Arabia and the U.S. and their political influence in the Middle East.
Dr. Koo, the whole world has been very interested in this grisly incident of Jamal Khashoggi's death. So why do you think so?
I think the whole world is very interested about this accident and crisis because it is kind of a symbol of a very severe oppression of journalists. He also brutally killed in the Saudi Arabian consulate in Turkey. So these affairs connected with Israel, Iran, and Turkey, and U.S. Actually, he criticized about not only about MBS, but also the king of the Saudi Arabia, and also he criticized about social problem of Saudi Arabia policy and political policy of Saudi Arabia. For example, he criticized about Saudi Arabia-led blockade against Qatar, Saudi Arabia's dispute with Lebanon, and he also criticized about Saudi war on Yemen. And he said Saudi Arabian MBS must restore dignity to his country by ending Yemen's cruel war. And also, of course, he supported that some kind of MBS reforms, like he allowed women to drive. But he condemned arrest of Saudi Arabia's female activists, such as Isla Al-Gungam and several other women, female activists who involved in the Women to Drive movement and other feminist social movement. And in his last column of the Washington Post, he insisted about what the Arab world needs most is free expression. He criticized the structural problems and lack of platform of Arab itself voices.
I see. So you're saying that Jamal Khashoggi wasn't just a critic of MBS, and he actually did write neutral columns that concerning Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
I understand. Let's hear more about that after we talk to some experts.
The significance of the death of dissident journalist Jamal Khashoggi is not just about getting down to the truth of what really happened, but it also highlights the complicated web of interests surrounding Saudi Arabia. U.S. President Donald Trump spoke to the media, seemingly defending the Saudi royal family regarding the death of Khashoggi, raising questions about the intentions behind his remarks.
The king firmly denied any knowledge of it. He didn't really know. Maybe, I don't want to get into his mind, but it sounded to me like maybe these could have been rogue killers.
As the voices criticizing the Saudi government grow stronger, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo paid a visit to Riyadh to meet with the king, while the director of the CIA, Gina Haspel, flew over to Turkey for further investigation. What's more, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin was also found to have quietly met with the Saudi Crown Prince to discuss economic ties, counterterrorism, and the investigation into Khashoggi's death. Meanwhile, Turkey promised to publicize the facts of its own probe.
Çünkü burada adaleti arıyoruz ve bu tüm çıplaklığıyla ortaya çıkacak. Böyle sıradan atılan bazı adımlarla değil.
Saudi Arabia and Turkey have been at odds over their diplomatic ties with Qatar and their economic cooperation with Iran. But the Khashoggi case has emerged as yet another factor that may further hinder the symbolic relationship between the two Middle Eastern countries. Will the U.S. and Saudi Arabia be able to maintain their critical political and economic ties despite worsening criticism around the world? And how will the death of the dissident journalist influence their status in the Middle East? We connect with local experts to analyze the positions of the countries concerned.
Let's connect to Turkey now, where the incident took place, and hear more about the current situation there. Maxime Mughal is on the line, the executive producer of TRT World, a Turkish international news channel. Welcome, Maxime.
Thank you.
The bilateral relations between Ankara and Riyadh, what is going to be like after this incident? And it seems like the political ties right now doesn't seem that good. But what do you think will happen from now on?
What Turkish authorities, the Turkish diplomats, and the Turkish president in himself itself has been saying that we need to do a very straightforward investigations, and that's what is being done right now. What is important to mention here is that a lot will hinge on what and how the Saudis behave. They haven't been really, I've been watching and following this story right from day one since it broke. I am in Istanbul. This incident took place in Istanbul. The Saudis haven't been really forthcoming. They haven't been really cooperating on the investigations front. They haven't been cooperating on the diplomatic front. So it doesn't really augur well, not just on the bilateral relations between Turkey and Saudi Arabia, but it also has pushed a lot of Saudi Arabia's Western allies into a very precarious position. So we'll have to see, we'll have to wait and watch. But at the moment, it doesn't really look that this is going to be a very positive development in terms of diplomatic relations, not just between Turkey and Saudi Arabia, but for Saudi Arabia in itself, because it's now being criticized by its Western allies. Even those allies have been coming under heavy criticism because they've been having their defense deals, they've been having their investments inside Saudi Arabia. So everything is now being questioned. So it's going to be really hard for Saudi Arabia to actually come forth and stand by what has happened at the Saudi consulate. It's going to definitely put them in a very, very difficult position in the days to come.
Maxime, you just mentioned that you have been covering this issue from day one, and your headquarters actually is in Istanbul, so you've been following the story. What do the people say there, the local sentiment there about this incident?
Look, there is a lot of sympathy for the journalist. There is a lot of interest at the same time, and this case has generated a lot of intrigue amongst the people. I mean, this is a nondescript consulate. On a normal day, you wouldn't even be able to spot it. It's inside the city. It's a quiet neighborhood, but people, given the media interest and the kind of impact the bilateral and the multilateral impact this story has. People have really been following it closely. People have been going outside and trying to visit and see this consulate and try to figure out what's been happening, because the media has been outside the consulate continuously ever since the story first broke. But also at the same time, there is a lot of sympathy for this journalist who has actually died inside a consulate. He'd never known what the consequences would be. He just walked in, he was preparing to get married to a Turkish national, Hatice, and he has just gotten in to just gather some paperwork and never did know that he would never return. So there's a lot of sympathy, there's a lot of intrigue at the same time.
Thank you, Maxime. That was Maxime Mughal from Istanbul. Dr. Kuz, so there are a lot of commentators who say that Turkey actually gains the most out of this horrific incident. Judging by Turkish President Erdogan's release of the timely details in a very well-timed manner and all these so on. So what's your thought on that?
Of course, Turkey and also Iran might benefit from this tragedy because Turkey wants to be a leader in the Middle East, because the Saudi Arabia was leader of this Middle East because by supporting the U.S. government. And in this time, Turkey wants to have some kind of economic benefit from U.S. And Turkey has a very important key open the Khashoggi's death. So Erdogan really wants to use this moment to have a chance to be a leader and want to earn some kind of economic and political power from this time.
Let's connect to a Saudi expert for more details. We have Ali Al-Ahmed, director of the Institute for Gulf Affairs in Washington, D.C. Good to have you on, Mr. Al-Ahmed.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure.
Currently, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is being suspected for the killing of Khashoggi. So tell us, who is he and what his reputation is like within the country?
I was the first to write a profile of Mohammed bin Salman back in 2015. From the sources I have, is this man is really a person who takes control. He is a strong individual. And you can see that in the fact that in a matter of short 2 years, he has taken over the country and eliminated any competition within the ruling family, and and shows his power and influence not only in the region but also on the United States and other countries. He is one of the youngest son of King Salman. King Salman has been always seen as the chairman of the ruling Al Saud family, who has a lot of control. So he inherited and learned from his father to do that. He is a big guy. He is a very tough person. And he is the strongest Saudi leader ever.
Speaking of the international interest, the U.S. is actually saying that they will impose sanctions on Saudi Arabia. France, Germany, and even UK are very serious about handling this issue. So do you think, under this international pressure, what kind of Saudi Arabian government or the royal family, what kind of choices will they make?
I think that there will be some surprising movement within Saudi Arabia in terms of realigning itself and what we call repositioning itself vis-a-vis certain countries. They will clash with some countries, but they will make concessions to some other countries. So they might clash with the Turks, but they will make concessions to the United States and to the UK, and a little bit of extend the relations to the Chinese, and even maybe they will make some overtures to Iran, because it's important to have this political balance. But there is not going to be massive leadership change in Saudi Arabia. There will be some maybe realignment, maybe some domestic policy steps to reopen a little bit the political environment. But I wouldn't see this massive change. I think Saudi Arabia has been always stable in its move against, especially when it comes to Western countries.
Okay, thank you. That was Ali Al-Ahmed, Director of Institute for Gulf Affairs. Thank you. We connect now straightforward to our discussions with an expert on Middle Eastern affairs in the U.S. We have Bülent Alirisa, Director and Senior Associate at the Turkey Project at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. What is the popular sentiment in the United States about this murder case of Khashoggi, who was a U.S. resident and a Washington Post columnist?
And what the newspapers here are doing, and the media has really taken this issue up, is to try and put pressure on President Trump to actually, make sure that Saudi Arabia, and specifically Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince, pays a price for it. But of course, President Trump does not pay much attention to the press, and particularly to the Washington Post, where he was a columnist, or to the New York Times, because if these newspapers had their way, Mr. Trump would not have won the election. And Mr. Trump is galvanizing his supporters against those newspapers, so I'm not sure that the media campaign is going to work.
As much as President Trump is facing very important time before the midterm elections in November, don't you think that President Trump actually has to take into account the local sentiment within the United States? So considering that, do you really see Washington imposing sanctions on Riyadh?
No. I mean, the fact that the Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, who did not attend the international conference that Mohammed bin Salman put together, but then made a separate trip where he was photographed with Mohammed bin Salman, just as Secretary of State Pompeo was again photographed with Mohammed bin Salman in Riyadh, smiling, leads me to believe that the Trump administration will not move beyond maybe cosmetic sanctions. But again, even there, I think it would be I'd be very reluctant to suggest that they're going to be in any way forceful. And the fact that Congress is not in session, it's all 435 members of the House of Representatives and more than 1/3 of the Senate are going to be submitting themselves for re-election, means that the noise is coming out of Congress, including from some within the Republican Party, like Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, and Senator Bob Corker, the outgoing chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee from Tennessee, are really not that important in trying to persuade Trump to move in this direction. I think he's got a relatively free hand. I mean, we're talking about the media being in a kind of frenzy, understandably, on this issue. But again, I'm not sure that the average voter is as concerned as that, and would be concerned if Trump fails to act.
Many commentators talk about Mohammed bin Salman, who is a newly rising leader in Saudi Arabia. He is young and he is experiencing a lot in politics and economy. So walk us through the Saudi Arabia and the United States ties and tell us what kind of changes the ties will see after this incident.
Mohammed bin Salman is the first of the so-called third generation of Saudi rulers. Until now, those who succeeded Abdulaziz Al Saud, when he died in 1953, were all his sons, including Salman, who is the father of Mohammed bin Salman. Mohammed is the crown prince, because his father is ailing, he's effectively running the country. And he's committed himself to a plan to wean Saudi Arabia from oil, to bring Saudi into a new era. And given the fact that the majority of Saudis are under the age of 30, is a breath of fresh air to many Saudis. It's difficult to see this from the outside, but that is the case after having lived through many octogenarians as rulers. Now, he has made some moves which also appeal to the outside world, like we're letting women drive. And he's also committed himself to fighting religious fanaticism. But, of course, if he did order this killing, that would be a blot on his record. Now, there are many members of the Saudi royal family who do not like him, who regard him as an upstart. He has to rely on the United States. And let us remember that Trump, a few weeks ago, said, if we don't support you, cannot last 2 weeks. And so as long as he has the United States on his side, I think he can face down those doubters inside and the critics outside. But if Trump were to withdraw his support for him, then he would be in trouble, and maybe the Saudis would look for a new crown prince. But as of now, I think his position, although it's damaged, seems to be secure.
Thank you. That was Dr. Bulent Alireza from Washington, D.C. Dr. Koo, so President Trump actually sent his Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, to Saudi Arabia after the incident. And it already shows us that Saudi Arabia means a lot for the United States, this oil-rich country. So what does this relationship really mean for the United States? And how do you project their bilateral relations to progress from now on?
I think even though this crisis, the U.S. and Saudi Arabia will have a good relationship in front of stage and at least a backstage. Because as Dr. Ali mentioned about that, Donald Trump, he chose Saudi Arabia even before he elected as, U.S. president. So Saudi Arabia is really important to U.S. This Trump government, because he want to have some kind of alliance anti-Iranian regime. So now he had a great supported by MBS and Saudi Arabian government. So he doesn't want to lose this very kind friend. And what makes U.S. and Saudi relationship so special? It is very simple: weapons, oil, and an army of lobbyists. And because over the 75-year strong alliance between the two nations has been built on a very simple arrangement: American demand for Saudi oil and Saudi demand for American firepower.
I understand. When we look at the Middle East, Saudi Arabia is definitely one of the top and leading this whole region in terms of economy and both diplomatically. But when we see this huge incident, it's really rattling the whole world. Do you think that this will actually have an impact on Saudi Arabia's position in the Middle East?
Of course. Until now, Mohammed bin Salman had a kind of positive opinion of the whole world. Until last year, Saudi Arabian woman couldn't drive. But this MBS quickly became known for his support for women driving and opening of some kind of movie theaters and comedy clubs, and his plan to diversify Saudi Arabia's economy. It calls like 2030 plan for the whole reformation of Saudi Arabian society. But until now, criticism about his role in the brutal war in Yemen and blockade of Qatar were brushed aside. But now the whole world watched this brutal accident. So MBS became no longer a social reformer, but yet another authoritarian. So because of this Khashoggi affair, Saudi Arabian confront actually will have a big crisis.
Right. So even though he is actually pushing for a lot of reforms and changes within the country, because of this huge incident, his reputation is no longer the same as we remember him as. How about the United States? The United States has continuously been trying to expand its influence in the Middle East, but now talking about sanctions and all these punishments towards Riyadh, do you think the United States will actually lose that power?
Of course, Trump government will get in trouble. Let's think about the relationship with Israel. Israel has a really good relationship with not only U.S., and they had a good relationship with Saudi Arabia. So it means Israel also lost his best friend in this Middle East. But until now, the U.S. administration efforts to GCC into an effective anti-Iranian coalition. In this time, it is very important, not only because of a Saudi Arabian regime. This Saudi Arabian regime and Israel, this connection is really important against Iranian regime. So maybe the U.S. government has a kind of headache to solve this very severe problem.
Right, headaches for a lot of countries inside the Middle East and across the oceans, right? We'll keep an eye on the developments that's going further. Thank you for your expertise today.
Thank you.
Speculations over the journalist's near 1-month disappearance ended with the confirmation of his death. As new developments continue to unfold, the international community is paying close attention to the ongoing investigation. Our team at The Point World Affairs will also keep close tabs on any new details that emerge from this story. That's all we have for this week. Thank you for watching, and see you again next week.